Friends, you are about to listen to a podcast between myself and Dr. Saundra Dalton-Smith. And she's somebody that I stumbled onto her content on Instagram. You can go find her there. And she deals with rest and helping, I think probably women in particular, find rest. And before you think, oh, I don't need a nap, I do a good job of, watching movies and reading books and I rest. No, she actually deals with like 7 different types of rest. I'm not going to spoil those for you, so you'll have to go listen to the podcast. And she has a quiz that you can go take her rest quiz to find out where you really need to get a lot more rest in your life. We talk about burnout on this episode. We talk about where you're spending your energy, mental rest. It is just it's a good conversation. And in full transparency, I was really selfish about wanting to have her on, and not sure that I didn't, when I asked her to be here, I had no intention of being super transparent with you, my audience, about the fact that I'm needing some rest in a lot of ways. And, when I look at our last 6 years as a family, we've adopted a child. We have had 3 additional homes. One of them we have sold, but we have 2 Airbnbs. Jason's got a new business. I started a software version of my company, a VA version of my company. My best friend got cancer the month after we brought in, Ari to our family. My parents decided to be full-time RVers the month after that. My husband had a terrible cycling accident 3 years ago at no fault of his own that's resulted into 3 surgeries. When I look at all those things, plus menopause in full effect, I'm actually postmenopausal, it's no wonder I'm tired to my core, but I have felt so guilty about that. And by the way, you don't have to have a laundry list of things. Like I didn't even need to say all those things, but in my head, that's been me like rationalizing why I'm feeling like I'm feeling. And I'm going to tell you about it on the podcast. And I just love how Dr. Saundra was able to really reframe that for me and see some things in a different fashion. For every single one of you who are running a business, you need to listen to this podcast and you need to just go ahead and forward it to your girlfriends who are business owners right now as well. For any of you who feel like you are maybe feeling a little burned out, or as I describe it, a little flatlined, I think this is going to be such a blessing to you. So listen to this podcast, share it on Instagram, give me a comment if you're watching it on YouTube. And I hope it's as big of a blessing for you as it has been for me. All right, here's Dr. Saundra. Well, hello, friends. Welcome back to the podcast. I have a super interesting guest with you today. In full disclosure, I have her here because of my own greediness and my own, I really want to interview this woman. So I have Dr. Saundra Dalton-Smith on today. Hello, how are you?
I am doing well, Jennifer.
So glad you're here. Okay, so what do you want me to call you while we're in this interview today?
Most people just say Dr. Saundra, just to simplify
Dr. Saundra. Okay, that's what I was thinking. I'm so excited to have you here with me. I was telling Dr. Saundra before I hit the record button that I actually had my team clear my calendar for the week of basically anything that wasn't an absolute necessity. So there's some things that I feel like I have to show up for. I mean, I don't have to. If I got hit by a truck, somebody else on the team would do it for me. But the different programs that I'm in the middle of, or I do the mindset training, or I do the coaching, I feel like those, are yeses I've said yes to, and I need to let my yes be yes and my no be a no. But otherwise, I have just felt tired and like I needed to get off the internet. I'm not sure when, Dr. Saundra, that this podcast episode will come out, but right now we are heading into the last week of July. So the world kind of feels like a hot, stinking mess. And whenever that happens, I'm like, get off of social media because it just does nothing but agitate me on the inside. And so I've had that agitation combined with it's summer and the kids are home and I just want to be with my kids and feeling perhaps maybe slightly just a little bit burned out, if I'm being real honest. And so when I was looking at my calendar, my team got everything off of it. And Kelly said, now what about Dr. Saundra? And I'm like, except her. I've already bumped her once. Let's do this Dr. Saundra interview. And I know it's going to be really good. And I'm guessing really timely for a lot of people. So thank you for being here. So tell me how it is that you came to do what it is that you do, because even though I follow you on social media and I can't even remember how I stumbled across your content, but also I saw you were already following me and I was like, This is amazing. But how did you become somebody that studies rest, talks about rest, teaches about rest? Well, how did that happen?
Because I burned out. That's the starting point for me. I personally
Okay.
burned out when I was in a medical practice at the time. I was at a place where most people would look at my life and said it was very successful. I was, already getting interviews and media and all the different things. And it was in that time period that I had kids. So both of my sons were born 21 months apart. I wasn't I did not have a strategy in place for how to manage my life when children were added on top of it. And I burned out. And then
Yeah.
that process of burnout, I had no intention of stopping practice. I practiced for another 15 years after that.
Yeah.
I needed to figure out how to be sustainable in a high stress environment
Okay.
and how to keep my pleasure and my joy of the work that I was doing in that process as well.
Mhm.
So that's really where it came from. Like you said, it's kind of like a really just a selfish need to figure this out for myself so that I
Right.
could stay in the work I wanted to do.
Are you able to almost like, I feel like the term burnout, it's kind of like loosey goosey. If I went to Webster's dictionary, it may say something, but like, how would you define burnout? Because if I was to ask a lot of our listeners, and the majority of them are going to be female entrepreneurs, not all of them,
Mhm.
but most of them, there's probably a huge percentage of them that also have children. And so, they're trying to be a spouse if they're married and be a mom if they have kids and trying to run a business. And so I'm wondering how many of them are experiencing some burnout, but just don't know that that's what it is. So how would you like define burnout?
Yeah, well, I love the definition from the World Health Organization.
Okay.
They actually now have actually quantified it so that it's actually listed as a disorder. And so the three characteristics that they identified were number one, you're tired all the time.
Okay.
Number two is you no longer have joy or pleasure in the work that you do. You no longer see value in it.
Okay.
And then number three is that the work you're producing is of lesser quality of what you're capable of. So you're just kind of putting out whatever you can put out, not necessarily your best work. And
Mhm.
I what we notice is that a lot of people are what we consider functional burnouts. They are able to show up every day, they are able to keep producing, they are, on the clock doing the work, doing whatever it is that they have
Yeah.
to do, but they meet all three categories. They are not
Why am
happy.
I smiling when you say that? I've never heard you
You're
talk about that. Um, I used to have a neighbor that someone told me we were very concerned about some things going on in the home, and I had a neighbor who was a police officer, and he said, "Well, they're a functioning alcoholic." I'm like, "What do you mean a functioning alcoholic?" And he's like, "Well, they can do all the things required of them.
Mhm.
They can show up. They put on a good face. You wouldn't know probably what's going on behind the scenes because outward facing." They're appearing to take care of business, take care of the family, take care of the house, but behind the scenes, things are a mess. And so is that kind of what you're talking about? It's the person who's able to show up for the podcast interview during the day and her other appointments, that were on her calendar. However, um, I think that in the past, the one of the ways I've described sometimes what I have been feeling in businesses, I feel flatlined.
Mhm.
Is that a
That's a
word?
very good, yeah, that's
I
a
just
very
feel
good word
flat.
for
I
it.
feel like everything's fine. It's not fabulous. It's not horrible. It's just fine. Like I feel almost is the word apathetic. Just
Mhm.
kind of okay. Interesting.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's, I love that terminology, flatlining, because in medicine that means something very specific, but
Great.
flatlining is complete, it's gone unless you revive it.
Yeah.
So it's
Oh,
not, technically it's not dead unless it's been dead for a moment. Well,
okay.
when someone flatlines, there's still a possibility of them being revived if we
Yes.
get to it quick enough.
Okay.
So I
So,
love that thought process, because I feel like a lot of people are at that point. They are basically at the end of themselves. They're empty. That's the word that I tend to use. They
that
feel
is a
empty.
really, oh man, I feel that like to the depth of me when you say that. And it's not that I don't enjoy what I do. By the way, I had Dr. Saundra and I talked right before we came on. How much of my story should I share? How transparent should I be? My team knows I'm just feeling a little bit like flatlined is the word I've used for them, like overwhelmed. Just not real super inspired at the moment. And I've been kind of trying to determine why. And in my head, it's like, well, it's summer. The world is a mess. I feel like as a country, we're all holding our collective breaths regardless of how anybody votes until after November. I feel like, business wise, the the space that I'm in, the coaching space, has changed dramatically in the last 6 to 9 months. And so I've been blaming it on all of those things. Like, the kids are home and one just got engaged. And so I've got all these big feelings that go with that. And, it's our first summer of not having a lot of help with our youngest daughter, who has some, I don't want to necessarily say special needs, but they are special to her for sure. And so I feel like in my head, I'm like, it's just a whole lot of things. And that's why I'm feeling flat. Is that accurate? Or is that?
Well, that's the thing with the work that I do, because with just kind of looking at my own story and the women that I've worked with, usually all of those things are hitting on an area of your life that is consistently being depleted, that does not have a system in place for restoration.
Okay.
One of the things that I talk about a lot is what we call rest deficits.
Yes.
So you're using energy, you're pouring out in whatever capacities, family, relationships, business, all the things. There are parts of yourself that you are using on a repetitive basis. And because you use it so often, you've learned how to function even at a deficit. In other words, you know how to pour from your emptiness.
Yeah.
So people are still getting blessed. Clients are getting results. Family's still happy. So they're getting blessed from your emptiness, but you recognize the emptiness. And the thing is, you're the only one that matters when it comes to that feeling of burnout, because it's your experience of it that's having the biggest effect. So the trick is how to then turn around and look and see where is the deficit? Where's the place that has gotten depleted that I have not filled back up? Because unfortunately, taking the vacation, taking time off, you can go and have the best massage, all the different things, and still come back empty if you don't fill the place where the deficit's at.
You're making me feel like I'm going to cry on this episode. So, this is just so accurate. And the reason it's accurate is because I've always considered myself just kind of a good little soldier. You just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You do what you've got to do, whether you feel like it or not. I think a lot of that comes from upbringing. A lot of that comes from being on my own at a very young age, with a lot of, responsibilities. I was on my own by the time I was 17, right before my 18th birthday, and, completely out from under the covering of my family, like financially, going ever home to live again, et cetera. And then bought my first home at age 21. So I've always been a super responsible person. So a lot of it, I'm like, it's just the way I'm wired. I just take care of business regardless of how I feel. What's interesting though, and I'm guessing you can speak to this, is the older that I get, and I'll be 53 next week, the harder I'm feeling like that is to do. And also I no longer feel like doing it. I no longer feel like, is that a good way to explain that? And by the way, this is nothing that's in my list of notes. We're just totally going Vogue right now, or Rogue, not Vogue. But the older I get, the more I'm like, I don't feel like showing up and doing what needs to be done. I'm too old to just keep saying yes, and I don't want to do it. And have I earned the right? This is the conversation in my head. In my brain as a business person, have I earned the right to come to my team and be like, you know what? I don't feel like it this week. And without explanation. And I'm still trying to kind of wrestle through that. So talk to me. Is this just how some of us women are wired? Is this how all women are wired? Is this menopause? What is happening?
I love this conversation because it is so real and raw, and it's not one I get to have very often. So I appreciate it.
Okay, well, let's go for it.
But I think let me just start with something you said in the very beginning part of that you basically described you're someone who has learned that you have to work. You've learned that work is a part of getting what you want out of life. And it came from hard things that you went through in your childhood. Well, that was my experience as well. I grew up in poverty. My mother died at childbirth, raised by, great grandmother of 70. One of those situations where I grew up like, I will not live like this. I am getting out of here and I'm going to, make something of myself.
Yes.
So when you grow up in those types of situations, you actually program yourself to be, for lack of a better word, fearful of rest, because rest almost feels like settling. And when you are a high achiever, settling is not in your vocabulary. It's like, I'm going after what I want to go after. And so there's a bit of even a mindset shift that has to be made before someone can embrace rest in a way that allows them to get the fullness of it. And that mindset shift is that rest is not about taking something away. It's not about pausing. It's not just about even cessation. It's really about restoration. It's about being able to do more of the things you want to do and
Right.
even to be able to do them from a place of continued joy and satisfaction. And so for a lot of women who have kind of that high achiever type personality, that's the number one issue. It's not that they've kind of usually have gotten beyond the point of feeling like they need anybody's permission to rest.
Mhm.
It's that they don't even, let me put it to you this way. They have a fantastic work ethic, but they have zero rest ethic.
Okay.
And work and rest are kind of a yin and yang situation. If you put all of the emphasis on the work and
Mhm.
none on the rest, the work becomes toxic. And you start feeling the toxicity of the work
Okay.
because there's no place for restoration there.
So let me tell you kind of where my rub is, I think, with all the things you just said, because I know you're going to help me to see it from a different perspective.
Mhm.
Because the truth is, and there's going to be other women that relate to this, I don't physically work a ton of hours. And so today I will be working here at the computer for 4 hours maybe. And that was the case yesterday and the day before. And I rarely am on the computer on Mondays and never on Fridays. So I shut this door, to my office. It's closed Friday, Saturday, Sundays. Sometimes on Mondays I don't have to come in here. So I'm looking at my life going, my work life going, okay, Jen, 3 days a week, you have to sit down and coach. Like suck it up. You're not working that hard. But then what I also know that I'm doing is I check email. I mean, if I'm being really transparent, I bet I open up my email on my phone 30 times a day. I bet I open up Instagram 30 times a day. I bet I go to Facebook, 4 or 5. So I'm saying I don't work that much. And yet I feel like I am being ruled by work on my phone. Am I speaking just for myself, or do you see this a lot with other women? Because then I try to tell myself, okay, but Jen, you still are working. And then I'll be like, yeah, but I take a lot of time off every Friday. I go get a massage. I do. I have a massage every Friday that I'm in Kansas City. I'm getting ready to go to Florida. I go to Florida for a week, every other month or so. So I'll be on a beach for the next week. Like I should come back completely rested, ready to go. I could tell my team, hey, I'm going to get off social media for a couple days, but like I don't know how to do that. I mean, I know
Yeah.
how to have the conversation. I just don't think I can. And then what I go back to is, well, it's that super responsible person. I know the emails are they're coming into my inbox and they're mounting up. And I know, that the social media DMs are mounting up and I need to respond. I need to and so that's where I think that I'm having issues at. Am I a crazy person? Can you help?
You're not a crazy person, but what you have described is that there's two parts to that. So one of the things I feel like when you talk about work, you define work kind of in these very specific parameters, the
Mhm.
time spent at your desk coaching or
Yes.
doing very specific things. I want
Yes.
you to broaden your thoughts of work because work and energy expenditure, primarily what I'm focusing on with the burnout is the energy expenditure.
Okay.
So, when I talk about the 7 types of rest, you have just to name them: physical,
Yes.
mental, spiritual, emotional, social, sensory, and creative.
Yes.
So entrepreneurs oftentimes don't have a lot of physical energy that they're using because
Mhm.
they're not lifting, they're not
Yeah.
construction workers.
Yeah.
They use an excessive amount of mental energy because they're processing, they're assessing and analyzing information. They use an excessive amount of creative energy, which most of them actually don't typically appreciate the level of creative energy that they use.
Yeah.
I know your background some, so you have a creative background,
Mhm. Yeah.
but then on top of that, part of the creative background is the creativity around problem solving. And
Okay.
as business owners, sometimes it's not just the creativity in like graphics and all those things that we think about. It's part of the problem solving within your business and even in your home.
Yes.
Things like problem solving, like how do I get the daughter to
Right.
soccer and the son to basketball and both
Yes.
are at the same time. So
Yes.
you have that level of
Okay.
energy that's being expended. So
Mhm.
what I recommend is kind of looking at all of these 7 buckets. Where are you expending a lot of this
Yeah.
energy?
Yeah.
And one of the ones that you talked about with social media is sensory rest.
Mhm.
Sensory rest
Okay.
is one that a lot of people aren't
I'm
really
looking at all my
familiar.
scores here as you're talking, and I'll have you tell people in a minute where they can go take the quiz, but go ahead, keep talking.
Yeah, so with sensory, that's one oftentimes that people aren't paying attention to. And then the
Mhm.
final one is emotional. And
Okay.
emotional rest is the one that requires us to even look at our boundaries with other people, what their expectations are us, how we allow ourselves to kind of have our time pulled, as
Uh-huh.
well as how free do we feel to be able to express what we're feeling. Do
Okay.
we are we carrying a lot of what I sometimes refer to um, as professional emotional labor? In other words, you're not always able to exactly say everything you want to say because you're having to stay in a level of professionalism as the
Okay.
business owner. And so when you start looking at all those different pieces,
Hmm.
sometimes what you notice is that there are places where you are using a lot of energy, but they're not a part of your technical work.
Okay. That makes complete sense to me. I did take your quiz. So I love following you on social media. When I first saw you start talking about different types of rest, I thought, okay, this is fascinating because in my head, rest was laying on the sofa, watching a movie, going to get a massage, taking a walk with the dogs, maybe, going playing pickleball with my kiddo, just laying around coffee in the morning with Jason. So like that's what I was thinking about rest. But when you broke it down about those 7 different types of rest, I was like, okay, I need to know more about this. So I'm going to go through them one more time. Okay. And then I'm going to tell you about my
Okay.
test. So it's physical rest, which I think is where my focus has been, maybe.
Most people.
Yeah. Mental rest, which I think logically I knew I need to rest my brain. Spiritual rest, emotional rest, social rest. As an introvert, I was like, oh, I think I've got the social rest down, but maybe not. Sensory rest and creative rest. So I took your quiz and everybody here can take the quiz for free. Am I right? They're going to
Yeah.
want to do that. Okay. Where do they go to take that at, Dr. Saundra? And I'll have you say that again at the end, but where do they go to take the test?
It's super simple. Just restquiz.com.
That's so good. Okay. So my score came up that it was the mental rest. That is my biggest number,
Hmm.
followed by physical, emotional, and sensory were all tied for second.
Mm,
And I'm
yeah.
like, okay, so when I'm looking at that, I'm like, okay. And then you have like, if your score is between this and this, and I only had one that was the highest number was 29. And I
Okay.
know that is like a level 3 if you're leveling
Yeah.
them, but you're feeling the effects of your lack of rest and you need a change. And I'm like, okay, so I haven't gotten to the point, the last one, which was my life is negatively being affected. And I'm like, okay, how do I right this ship like now before we get there? And then I just one day I'm like, you know what, to heck with everything, you know, and just do a complete pivot and leave my business, leave my life. No, I'm not going to do that. But like, is that what happens sometimes to people? They get into such a depletion mode that then they get down to that area where everything is negatively affected. And is this when people just close shop on their businesses and make
Or
crazy?
worse. Yeah,
Okay.
or worse. Oftentimes, unfortunately, I do a lot of work with companies, and oftentimes by the time they're calling me to assist with their burnout issue in their businesses, it's because someone's already got a divorce, committed suicide, done something else that's like
Yeah.
irreversible, and so
Yeah.
we don't want to have people get to the place where they're so depleted that they're
Yes.
in there making decisions out of their emptiness.
Yeah.
The emptiness has kind of taken over their life in
Right.
every area.
Right. So for someone like me whose mental rest is what is, at most risk at the moment, what kind of advice do you give them? Because is mental rest possibly for a lot of female entrepreneurs the thing that is the challenge for them?
It's usually one or two things that I find to be at the very top, mental
Okay.
and then emotional.
Okay.
A lot of entrepreneurs have a tendency to hold on to their feelings because they don't feel like it's safe to talk
Mhm.
about all the things, or they
Yeah.
feel weak if they talk about some of the things that are popping up. So those are the top two. With mental rest deficits, one of the let me start by saying what some of the symptoms are,
Okay.
because sometimes it's hard to identify if this is what's
Sure.
affecting me.
Is it
Some
okay
of
that I'm taking notes while you're
Yeah.
saying? I'm literally like, I need all this woman's knowledge. Go ahead. All right.
Yeah, some of the symptoms of a mental rest deficit is you lay down at night and you can't get your brain to shut up. It's like I can't shut down shop even in my head to be able to get my
Mhm.
mind to quiet down. Another can feel almost as if you're going through early dementia. It's like you can't recall things as quickly and you're wondering why you're forgetful of stuff.
That
You
is
walk
that is
into
me.
rooms and you're
Yep.
like, what, why am I here?
Yeah.
You can't remember list. Another one is that you find it very difficult to actually focus. So may have never been diagnosed with like ADHD or anything like
Yeah.
that, but it's like all of a sudden I've turned into that person where I
Yes.
can't keep a thought and I'm always kind of one
All
thing
over
to
the place.
another.
Yeah.
The problem, well, I shouldn't say the problem, but one of the things that adds to that is a lot of us have trained our brain to to multitask.
Yes, we have.
Kind of programmed ourselves to be
Mhm.
multitaskers, and we've actually unprogrammed our brain to concentrate.
Yes,
Just the
that's
thought
so good.
process of having 10 screens open at one time.
Yes.
Back in the day, you wanted something, you pulled open the information, you remembered it, you went to somewhere else, you typed it up,
Yeah.
you practiced actually memorization. Now we do the exact opposite.
Yep.
Because I can open up a screen and get info in a minute, I've trained my brain, I don't have to recall anything.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of people, it's not that you have early dementia, you've just unprogrammed your brain for memorization.
That's
So
so
it
good.
doesn't look to figure out how to keep something in it. It just
Yeah.
expects you to open the next window and find it somewhere else. And then unfortunately, when we ruminate over information. So when you're laying in the bed and you mentioned you have a child getting married. And so if you're like me, you probably have some worries as a mom. There's all stuff that
Yeah.
pops up with change. You're laying in the bed, you're thinking about this thing, you're sometimes kind of ruminating over thoughts. Well, rumination is the memorization process. When you're trying to learn biology or chemistry, you think about it over and over again. That's how
Yeah.
you study it. When we worry or ruminate over a thought, it actually our brain identifies it as a study type process, and it actually will hold on to that information even at the expense of you sleeping. So
Okay.
we have a lot of people who right now, especially when you mention you're doing a lot of physical rest things,
Hmm.
that are good, that should be
Yeah.
helping you with physical rest. However, if you are not able to quiet down your brain, which
Yes.
is the mental and the sensory, if you're not able to quiet the brain down, it'll actually keep you from going into deep restorative sleep
Okay.
because
I would
you're
agree with that. I can lay my head down and be asleep though in 30 seconds at night. I can fall asleep so quickly, but I wake up and if I have a thought, then, then I'm like,
off
dang
to
it,
the
now I'm
races.
awake. Yep. And so there's a lot of times I'm not feeling like it's restorative sleep. It feels very interrupted and off and on versus, isn't it funny how when we're kids, like we never want to sleep and we get to this age and we're like, it's just what I would do for sleep. And so I get that. And it's interesting too, because, I feel like, okay, I take a lot of, we'll say vacations to our house in Florida and I'll be there, for the next 7 or 8 days. And so I should come back super rested. But I also know I won't completely disconnect from my phone. I won't disconnect from my email. I won't disconnect from my team, my Voxer, my social media. And so then it's like I'm getting a vacation from meetings, but not a vacation from the things that are really what's depleting me in the first place.
Exactly. And so, and I know it's a little scary sometimes because just real rest for someone who grew up like we did, where you kind of have a little bit of scrappy in you,
Yeah.
it's a little bit scary,
Yeah.
because it's not something that most of us had modeled to us. If anything, we had the exact opposite modeled: work, and work hard. And so, just to begin with, even the mental rest part of it, one of the things you mentioned is like you wake up and you have this thought. For a lot of people, brain dumping is the beginning of getting some mental rest. So when they have a thought, if you try to just like flip over and go back to sleep, or as some people say, God speaks to them in the middle of the
Yeah.
night,
Yeah.
you're not going to go back to sleep. You're going to keep thinking that thought over and over again.
Yeah.
However, because of the brain, the way it works, when you write something down, it actually gives it permission to release it because now the brain no longer feels the responsibility of holding on to the information.
Okay.
It's like you took the
That's good.
test. The test
Yeah.
is over. You can close the book, go to
Yeah.
sleep. So that's one place to start.
Okay.
Another is actually finding ways within your life to downgrade the number of decisions that you make. When you have to do a lot of decision processing, it just adds to the problem.
It's decision
And so
fatigue.
it
Yes.
absolutely, and it just
Yes.
adds to the problem.
Mhm.
If you're listening and you're an entrepreneur and you find that you have what do you want for dinner with your family, and then you get 15 different restaurants as everybody wants something
Yeah.
different, that's unnecessary exhaustion.
Mhm.
So even just kind of tweaking some of the things that we normally do, sending your family a message that says, do you want this or this?
That's good. Okay.
It's like we're not going to go down the rabbit hole
Mhm.
of all the different
Yeah.
options. Um, Even for yourself, simplifying some things. Most of us can get away with having 2 to 3 options for breakfast,
Yeah.
4 to 6 options for lunches that we rotate in some type of cycle. And
Okay.
honestly, for most of it, it's actually healthier for us that way because we don't slip into eating trash just
Yeah.
because we don't know what we're
Mhm.
doing that day. And so having some routines that are built in that removes some of the extra kind of processing that we do is
Okay.
beneficial. And then when it gets to the phone, as you mentioned, the kind of
Yes.
your gadgets, having even just periods of the day when you time block.
Okay.
So I get it, as an entrepreneur, my business is very similar. I have to be able to quickly, get people when people reach out about speaking, I need to be able to turn things around pretty
Yeah.
fast. I can't
Yeah.
just sit on that for 2 months. When those kind of things come in, what I find is I need to respond, but I don't need it to control me.
Okay.
The feeling that I am compelled to respond within a certain period of time feels very limiting and controlling.
Mhm.
However, if I time block it and I say that, every day between 8 and let's say 9 or something, I'm going to time block my emails.
Okay.
And I can have, and
Meaning
for me,
that's when
myself
you will
personally,
address emails. Okay.
yeah, for
Right.
myself. So this is my personal schedule. I have 3 time blocks that I do for emails because going in and out of emails is stressful for me. And I don't
It's
want to have
stressful
it
for me
popping up.
too. Yes.
And if
Why do
you just
yes, I hate it. And so what are your 3 times a day that you allow yourself?
I have one big block in the morning and I don't have it immediately in the morning. I usually have
Okay.
it between 9 and 10. Then
Okay.
I have so it's an hour between 9 and 10 to answer as
Yep.
much of that stuff as I can deal with.
Yep.
Right after that big email block, I do something that does not require me to look at the screen.
Okay.
So whether that's business planning, whether that's kind of a moment to just brainstorm, but I do something that doesn't have me on the computer for like 30 minutes after that.
Okay. Sure.
And then my second time block is usually about 30 minutes. And I do that around 1 o'clock because usually if there's anything that's going to pop up after the morning, so it's a
Mhm.
little short time block then to kind of clean up anything else that's come in or replies. And then the last one is right before I leave for the day. It's usually no more than 10 to 15 minutes. And it's
Okay.
just to put out any fires that
Sure.
have set off, you know,
Yeah. Now,
that can
how
be
do you
handled quick.
actually, so like I know for me, I know I have a weakness for Hershey's Kisses, raw chocolate chip cookie dough. Therefore, I don't keep Hershey's Kisses in the house or chocolate chips because if either of them are here, I am going to make cookie dough. I have figured out how to take my favorite recipe and divide it by a fourth, and I'll sit there and make a bowl, and I'll have that stuff all ate. Okay, so I know I can't keep stuff in the house.
Mhm.
So I know left to my own devices without some sort of safeguard on my phone, things are going to continue exactly like they are right now. I'm picking it up 100 times a day. I'm looking at emails 30 times a day. So what would you suggest? Like, do I need to, is there some way I can go into my settings and I can change something so that, I can only open my email app from a certain time to certain time? Do you suggest that like a physical safeguard like that?
I think that is helpful, especially if you know your own tendency is
I do
to
know.
kind
Mhm.
of go to that. Something to keep in mind, however, though, if you're getting push notifications and that's kind of what's prompting it, for example, you mentioned social media, if you're getting a lot of
I
notifications letting
don't
you know,
actually. I have
oh,
my
good.
notifications all turned off. It's more like if I have a moment of boredom or a moment of just nothing filling it, it just feels like I should open up email. I should open up social media. I know I have stuff waiting for me in both places. I should go ahead and take care of it quick so that I don't have to later. But what's interesting is anytime I go to our home in Florida, the Wi-Fi is horrible, which is
Mhm.
one of the reasons I love it. And I find myself distracted enough by the beach, the beauty, the doing other things that I tend to forget to open up all of my apps as much as I do. And it's always fascinating to me that it'll be like, so I open it first thing in the morning, which is awful. I should know better. Like I'm a smart enough girl to know that is awful to roll over in bed, open up my email. I mean, anybody knows that that's not a good practice, and yet I continue to do it. But then I'll find myself, oh, it'll be 10:30 before I open again. And I'll think, oh, I can't believe that for like the last 3 hours, 4 hours, I haven't opened up my email. That's amazing. And that feels like a break. and yet I'm like, I need to somehow recreate that every day. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's such a good point. And actually what you described there with going to your vacation home is actually what we consider creative rest. You
Okay.
find time you're breaking away to appreciate beauty, and in that appreciating beauty, it kind of
Yes.
creates stuff inside of you.
Yes.
When you're in your regular home setting, however, and you have those moments where you describe them as boredom, how about replacing that or using, let's say, those opportunities as moments for restorative practices?
Okay.
So you took the quiz, you kind of know some of the different
Mhm.
areas where you're
Yeah.
needing restorative practices. The number one thing people say is, I don't have time. Number one
Okay.
comment I hear, I don't have time to rest.
Mhm.
However, we do have time for everything else, even things that are repetitive and sometimes even non-productive.
Yeah.
So if we, instead of using that energy that you would use, let's say during those couple of down moments
Mhm.
to flick on and just kind of scroll through something,
Yeah.
instead, let's say if you mentioned social rest.
Mhm.
Social rest for a lot of, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, still requires something to do with people, because a lot of us don't have people in our lives who are just purely life-giving, and we
Okay.
don't, and if we do, we don't spend enough time with them where we feel poured into.
Okay.
So even having like a 10-minute moment in the middle of the day where maybe you call up a girlfriend, or maybe if you're going to be on the phone, you're doing something that actually doesn't have you looking at the phone. Maybe it's talking to
Okay.
somebody through
Okay.
the phone, so
Yeah.
that you have some connection and relationship and conversation, but kind of making it so that you're using some of that energy that you would just use for other activities to
Mhm.
actually pour it back into yourself,
Okay.
to do a restorative practice that would actually help you. Whether it's, often the other thing I hear people say is, I don't have time to work out. That's too much. I don't have
Mhm.
time to go to the gym and all the different things. Okay, well, maybe during that 5 minutes right after doing all those emails, you do something that just helps you clear your head for that mental
Yeah.
rest that you're
Take a quick
needing.
walk or something.
Yeah. You go outside, you take a quick walk, you do a little bit of stretching on your floor, you walk in place, try to get your Fitbit up to, 5,000 or
Yeah.
whatever number you're trying to reach,
Yeah.
something where you are basically honoring that you are a person,
Okay.
you have limitations, naturally, we all do, and you're going to honor your own need for rest in a
Mhm.
tangible way in that moment, and whatever activity you decide to do with that.
Okay. I went to my team, it was probably at the beginning of this year, and I just said, I have figured out about myself. And it's interesting to me. I'm like, did it take me 52 years to really know myself? Or is it just, do we figure out more the older we get? I don't know what the answer is, but it may just be common for this age. But I've just kind of figured out, okay, if I don't work out in the morning, I won't work out at all. I keep telling myself I can do it at 3 when my meetings are done. I can do it at 4, but I've come to the realization that 9 times out of 10, I just won't. And so I went to my team and I said, could we try to just keep my calendar, like I don't start any meetings until noon every day. If I have to, I'll do 1 o'clocks, or I'm sorry, 11 o'clocks, which is when I started today.
Mhm.
But then that way I can go ahead and at least get a workout done in the morning, which that physical exertion is really good for my mind. It
Yes.
really is. Is it just the endorphins? Is that
Well, not just that, for a lot of people who have a lot of time kind of getting that cerebral calm, the activity actually works as a mindfulness practice. For example, when somebody's jogging, they're narrowing their attention down to their cadence and their breathing,
yes.
and that's basically what mindfulness is. And
Okay.
so for a lot of us, we don't sit around and hum at a piece of grass, but we need mindfulness type
Uh-huh.
practices to redirect our focus from all of the external and kind of just back
Uh-huh.
to a place of calm. And
Okay.
that's what physical activity does for a lot of people. It's the
Okay.
one time that you're so focused on your body and your kind of physicality that it forces your mind to kind of come into alignment.
Is it terrible that when I'm at the gym, I'm often responding to Voxers from clients?
I would not recommend,
Okay. I
because
know, right? Because here,
you're
this is
stealing from your opportunity there.
okay. But that's going back to that multitasking. This is me thinking, I'll do a twofer. I'll discipline my body and get some work knocked out real quick, both while I'm at the gym.
I love that. Can you give me 1 second?
I absolutely can.
Hold on 1 second.
No, you are absolutely fine. I'm just going to remind everybody, if you're watching on YouTube or listening on your podcast app, the quiz that I took from Dr. Saundra is at restquiz.com. Go take that. Let me know the results that you get and where you most need some help after you do that. But it was fascinating to take that. And I know Dr. Saundra has been having storms in her area today. Everything okay on your end?
It is. I needed
Okay.
to recharge up with a different power
Okay,
outlet.
no
So we're
worries.
good.
We're almost to our time anyway. Okay, so stop working while I'm at the gym is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay.
Because I think for the most part, when you have those moments, it's a part of it really is that mindset shift that rest is important. It's just as important as the work. It's just as important as, meeting the deadlines and doing all of these other things. Because ultimately, no matter how big any of our businesses get, if we don't feel like we have freedom within them, it still feels like a prison.
It
And
still does,
so
100%.
yeah.
That is accurate.
So
Yeah.
there has to be parts of your day where you're almost reconfirming to yourself, I am a free woman. This is the life
Mm.
I get to create. I have the capacity and the ability and the responsibility to build a life that actually feels good to exist within. And that type of life includes true restoration. Not just sleep, sleep's a part of it, not just rest is like stopping,
Yeah.
but true restoration where I can pour out, and even in my pouring out, I am satisfied, but I don't stay empty. I actually make space in my life to be poured back into on a regular basis.
That is so good. That is such a great place to end too. Thank you for that. You've given me a lot to think about. I literally have been taking notes, and I am going to put some things. I'm gonna have to ask my team, how do I do that thing on my phone where I can't even turn on my email until a certain time. Burnout is people are able to come back from it. Am I right?
Absolutely. That's why I love the flatline approach, because even if someone is at true burnout, I
Yeah.
have people I work with who their scores are everything's 40. I mean,
Yeah.
they're like I was when I started this process. They are literally at the end of themselves. In my book, Sacred Rest, I opened with myself on the floor, and I laid
Mm.
myself down on purpose because I just could not see going any further the way was
Yeah.
going. I had the life of my dreams. I'm
Yeah.
literally looking up at the chandelier in my home,
Yeah.
as I'm laying on the floor. And the whole time I'm thinking, how did I get here?
Yeah.
But I got there because that's what I built. I built a life that didn't stop, that didn't have
Yeah.
any margin,
Yeah.
and it didn't feel good. And
Yeah.
I needed to build something else.
Well, thank you for taking your story and your pain and making it into something that could help the rest of us. Tell everybody about your book and where they can get that at.
Yeah, it's the name of the book is Sacred Rest: Recover
Mhm.
Your Life, Renew Your Energy, Restore Your
Yes.
Sanity. It's available wherever books are sold. My podcast is I Choose My Best Life, and that's also the name of my website, ichoosemybestlife.com.
And she's got a great Instagram account. So go follow Dr. Saundra there. And if you've got just 2 more minutes, can I ask you some rapid fire fun questions about you,
Yeah,
just so we can get to know you a little bit better? Okay. And these are just for fun. So don't give it a lot of thought. But first one, what could you spend hours doing?
reading.
Oh, me too. Me too. What kind of books? Tell me that.
I love all kind of books. I read not a lot of nonfiction just because I'm really nerdy. But then if I'm not reading that, I love mystery stories.
Okay. Well, actually, no, not same. I have made myself in the last year stop reading anything about how to be a better wife, how to be a better mother, how to be a better businesswoman. I'm like, I can't. I just need to read stuff that's made up, which I always have to stop and think, is it fiction or nonfiction? So I'm reading fiction. So I just to, kind of escape from I got to be better at everything that I'm doing. But okay, I love that. I love that. What's the weirdest thing you own?
The weirdest thing I own.
I know, right? That's a weird
First
question.
thing that came to mind was my little Havanese dog, because she is the whole experience. So,
A whole vibe. I get it.
oh yeah, she huffs whenever she's upset. She gives you the evil eye, and
Oh, that's
yeah.
funny.
So
That's funny. What was your last big financial splurge on?
coaching for myself. My last big financial splurge was coaching for myself. Not well, it was for my
Yeah,
business as well, but it was really just to help me get outside of my own way of
I
thinking about what's possible.
I love that. What's one thing you can't live without?
Chocolate.
Mm, amen. Yes and amen. Last one. What's one thing you're surprisingly good at?
I am surprisingly good at writing lyrics.
Really? Music lyrics, songs.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Very strange. I've been doing it for a long time.
Do you
Actually
do
have
it for people or
I
for companies or?
actually have some stuff that's actually been recorded. It's really strange. I keep my name out of it. But
That is
it's something I
amazing.
really it's actually part of my emotional rest. I can say how I truly feel in lyrics.
I love that so much. Something we never would have guessed about you. That's fabulous. Thank you so much, Dr. Saundra, for being here. This was so fun and so insightful. And I do need to get your book. I took your quiz. I didn't get your book. So I do need to go do that. But just thank you for being a safe place to have, a safe conversation. When you said, you build a life that other people would look at, and you had your chandelier, like I look at my life and I'm like, it has to look so charmed from the outside. And it is. And so then I struggle inside of myself. I'm thinking, why then do I feel so burnt out and empty when people would trade stuff with me in a minute? And so it almost makes me feel guilty. So thank you for just being a safe place to share and to give me some really some good feedback, some things to think about. So appreciate you so much. All right, you guys go check out Dr. Saundra's book. And it's called Sacred Rest. Go find her quiz. Go find her on Instagram. I had you brought up in Instagram right before we got on here, because it's not doctor in front of it, right? Is it Saundra Dalton-Smith with no doctor in front of it when I go to search for it? I think that it is. Yes, if you type in Saundra Dalton-Smith, you will find her Instagram. So I think she's having some struggles with the internet on her end, which she's had storms all day in her area. So she may or may not be able to hear me, but thank you so much for being here. And friends, thank you for listening to this. And the majority of you, other business owners, and some people that are really burned out and they're exhausted. They're females who work really hard, but you also know they're tired. Would you forward this podcast episode over to them? I think it'll be a big blessing to their life and to their business. So, all right, friends, thank you so much for being here. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.